79 years ago, the world changed forever. In August 1945, 2 atomic bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man, were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, bringing World War II to an abrupt and devastating end. The mushroom clouds that rose over those cities have cast a long shadow over history, sparking a debate that continues to this day. Was this horrifying act truly necessary to end the war and save lives? Or was it an unnecessary display of power with catastrophic human consequences? Let's explore the complex reasons behind one of the most momentous decisions in human history. To understand why this happened, we have to go back to the brutal reality of 1945. World War II had been raging for nearly 6 years. Europe was in ruins, but the war in the Pacific was still fiercely contested. Japan's military leadership, driven by the Bushido Code of Honor, was showing no signs of surrender. They had faced defeat after defeat, yet they fought on with ferocious determination. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were terrifying previews of what was to come. On Iwo Jima, out of 22,000 Japanese defenders, only about 200 were taken prisoner. The rest fought to the death. On Okinawa, the fighting was even more intense. It was an 82-day bloodbath that resulted in over 110,000 Japanese military casualties and an estimated 140,000 Okinawan civilian deaths, many of whom were caught in the crossfire or forced into combat. American casualties were staggering too, with over 12,000 killed and 38,000 wounded. These battles painted a grim picture for American military planners. The next step was the invasion of the Japanese mainland itself, codenamed Operation Downfall. It was planned in 2 parts: Operation Olympic, the invasion of the southern island of Kyushu, followed by Operation Coronet, the invasion of the Kanto Plain near Tokyo. US military leaders anticipated a fight of unprecedented scale and ferocity. They estimated that Japan had over 2 million regular soldiers and a civilian militia of millions more, all being trained to resist the invaders with everything from bamboo spears to suicide tactics. The potential casualties were horrifying to contemplate. Projections for American losses varied widely, but some estimates went as high as 1 million casualties. For the Japanese, an invasion would have meant the complete destruction of their homeland and a civilian death toll that could have run into the millions. It was in this context that President Harry S. Truman was faced with an almost unimaginable choice. He had only learned about the Manhattan Project, the top-secret program to develop the atomic bomb, after Franklin D. Roosevelt's death in April 1945. The project had been a monumental scientific and industrial effort, costing billions of dollars and employing hundreds of thousands of people, all in a race against Nazi Germany. When the first bomb was successfully tested in the New Mexico desert on July 16, 1945, Truman was at the Potsdam Conference with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin. The news of the successful test gave him a new, terrifying option. Here was a weapon so powerful it might just be able to shock the Japanese leadership into surrendering without a full-scale invasion. The primary argument, then and now, for using the atomic bombs was that it was the lesser of 2 evils. The goal was to end the war as quickly as possible and save lives, specifically American lives, but also Allied and paradoxically Japanese lives that would have been lost in Operation Downfall. Supporters of the decision, including Truman himself, argued that the bombs were simply a military tool used to achieve a necessary military objective. From their perspective, there was no moral difference between destroying a city with thousands of conventional bombs, as had been done to Tokyo and Dresden, and destroying it with a single atomic bomb. The outcome, total destruction, was the same. The purpose was to break Japan's will to fight. But the story is more complicated than that. International politics, especially the looming Cold War, also played a significant role. By the summer of 1945, the alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union was already showing signs of strain. Stalin had promised to enter the war against Japan 3 months after Germany's surrender, which would be in early August. Some historians argue that Truman wanted to end the war before the Soviets could invade Japan and claim a stake in the post-war settlement as they had in Eastern Europe. Dropping the bombs would not only force Japan's surrender, but also serve as a powerful demonstration of America's unique military might to Stalin and the rest of the world. It was a way to establish American dominance in the new global order that would emerge from the ashes of the war. The selection of the target cities was also a deliberate process. The targets needed to be cities that had been largely spared from conventional bombing so that the full, devastating effects of this new weapon could be accurately assessed. They also needed to have significant military or industrial value. Hiroshima was chosen because it was the headquarters of the Second General Army and a major military port and industrial center. Kyoto, the ancient capital, was initially on the list but was spared due to its immense cultural and historical significance, thanks in large part to the objections of Secretary of War Henry Stimson. Nagasaki, a major seaport with significant shipbuilding industries, was ultimately the second target. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay dropped Little Boy on Hiroshima. In an instant, the city was obliterated. Tens of thousands of people died immediately, and tens of thousands more would die from their injuries and the effects of radiation in the days, months, and years that followed. Even after this unimaginable horror, the Japanese military leadership remained deadlocked. Some members of the Supreme War Council were still determined to fight on. It was then, on August 9th, that two crucial events happened almost simultaneously. The Soviet Union officially declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Manchuria, crushing the Japanese forces there. And just a few hours later, the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. The combined shock of these two events was finally enough to break the stalemate. Emperor Hirohito, in an unprecedented move, personally intervened. Citing the new and most cruel bomb, he urged his government to accept the Allied terms of surrender. On August 15th, the people of Japan heard their emperor's voice for the first time, announcing the end of the war. So why were the bombs dropped? The answer isn't simple. It was a convergence of factors: the desire to avoid a bloody invasion and save American lives, the strategic goal of demonstrating power to the Soviet Union, the immense momentum of the Manhattan Project, and the grim calculus of total war. The decision remains one of the most debated actions in history. Critics argue it was a war crime, an act of state terrorism that targeted civilians. They point out that Japan might have been on the verge of surrendering anyway, especially with the Soviet invasion, and that less destructive demonstrations of the bomb's power could have been attempted. Supporters maintain that in the desperate context of 1945, Truman made the best choice he could with the information he had, a choice that ultimately brought a horrific global conflict to a close. Looking back, the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is not just about the end of World War II. It's about the dawn of the nuclear age and the constant, terrifying awareness that humanity now possesses the power to destroy itself. The decision made in 1945 forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about war, morality, and the price of peace. It's a somber reminder of our shared responsibility to ensure that such weapons are never used again. Thank you so much for watching. This is a topic with many different perspectives, and it's important to understand them all. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.